I wouldn't want people to look at me and think that I'm this kind of freak, you know, because I'm not.
And for lots of people, they're frightened. They have fear.
I tell teachers and people that look after kids or help kids with autism that when they've met one child with autism, they've met one child with autism.
Are you excited? Are you excited? Hello, 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 hello. We realised that there was something delayed in his development at about 6 months, but it took till the age of 4 for him to get a diagnosis of autism. He wasn't babbling, he wasn't doing any of the speech sounds that children are supposed to do. He wasn't pointing or waving, any of that early communication. Pretty much the only thing he can say is ba. He makes some vowel sounds as well, and when he's unhappy he squawks, but ba is his favourite word. Are you excited? Are you excited? You are? Oh, that's really good. I think at one point we counted he'd screech up to 40 or 50 times a minute. It was really difficult. He was terribly noisy, very high-pitched, and very frustrated and upset.
It really ranges from people who are a bit odd when they do maths at Oxford to kids who can't recognise their own parents.
Some behaviours that people might notice about children or individuals with autism include something called self-stimulatory behaviours, and these are quite often the things that people think of as classic autism.
Have a lovely day.
So perhaps tiptoe walking, or flapping your hands, or jumping about a lot, or making high-pitched noises.
If you spot and identify something early, get the expert help in, that is not about sort of solving it or curing it, but it's about understanding it and then making sure that you can then deal with it in school.
Let's sing hello to Oliver, hello, hello.
One of the reasons Oliver is so calm and happy now is because the intervention was started so early, and he was helped to do so many things that he might not otherwise be able to do.
I suppose one of the things that is specific about autism is that if you left an autistic kid to his or her own devices, a lot of them would be perfectly happy, actually, doing the same thing over and over again for hours and hours and hours. The point is that you need to interrupt that all the time, and the particular method of education at Treehouse does that, makes sure that the kids are focused on an individual task, broken down into tiny parts, and they're always involved. Whereas some of the other schools, they were saying, well, we want the kids to be self-reliant. We kind of want almost the opposite of that. Of course, the ultimate goal is self-reliance, but you really have to stop them falling into a kind of autistic black hole.
Tunnel, you asked for the tunnel.
It's a metaphor in a way for everything that happens with autism, which is that if you start to look at the next 10 years in advance, you'd think, I can't cope with this. But if you take each step as it comes, then it's more or less okay. If you're coping today, then you have to presume you're going to cope tomorrow. For me, you look at Danny, and he wasn't toilet trained when he started at school, and pretty much everything that he can do now he couldn't do before he started at Treehouse. Danny's been at Treehouse for something like 11 years now. When he started, he found it very difficult to be with people.
You're standing very nicely, nice hands. Let's go back to your activity.
It's very rewarding working with children with autism. You establish a very unique relationship with children, and you establish a high level of trust. Quite often it's a long, hard slog to make small steps of progress, but when those small steps of progress are made, the staff have a party, be here at 3:30, and there's always something to celebrate.
You've got all of your tokens. You've got your toy.
Polly's been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and an anxiety disorder.
It's like a replica of my favourite shows. They've got a book like this, so You know, being off school and that, I just decided to make one. I've tea stained like 300 and something pages, wrote on them all, and so yeah, this is it. That's one of my favourite pages. My book.
She's been out of school now since November, and that was our choice to take her out of the school that she was in. We thought that she was being naughty, not wanting to go to school and that sort of thing, you know, wanting to do what she wanted to do. But it sort of grew to the level where she was quite violent and aggressive and over the top temper tantrums than you would expect for a child that sort of age.
I felt like they didn't really get me, and you know, they used to tell me go and socialise, go do this, go do that, and I used to like eat my lunch in the toilets or like hide in my locker.
Educationally, she was flying. I mean, she was in a grammar school and gifted and talented in science and her languages and things. But socially and emotionally, she was still very, very young.
These other girls became friends with me, and well, I thought they were, and they used to tie a tie around my neck and tell me to be their dog and that. And these were things that I didn't even realise that they were, you know, I just wanted to have people to be with, you know. I got quite ill and I had to go to a psychiatric ward for a little bit.
I suppose by that point, my husband and I were just on autopilot and completely numb, that we didn't really accept what was going on, but we just went with it and did what we had to do. Because obviously we had 2 other children with autism at home that needed us to not change our routine and that sort of thing. So it was a very, very hard time, a very hard time.
If you're having proper child-centred learning, then that's the school's responsibility. And it doesn't mean that everybody has to be an expert, but everybody needs to know enough about what's going on to see the signs.
We had a lesson with one of my teachers, my German teacher. He said about eye contact once, and I spoke to Mum about it, and she gave me some techniques about, you know, instead of doing that, look here. And people don't know things like that.
We try and not laugh, but there are some times that you just can't help it, because they're just telling Josie that she could be anything she wanted to be when she grew up, and she decided she wanted to be a black Labrador called Tessa. So at that point I realised I had to be really careful how I spoke to my kids, but she then started really thinking she was a dog, and we had to throw sticks across the field to get her to go to school. And
when we go out with Oliver, it can be a little tricky, so he can lie down on the floor of the shop or get obsessed by an escalator and be determined to go up and down 30 or 40 times. And it would be wonderful for people to understand why that's going and not to feel afraid to come up and ask, not to feel embarrassed, not to feel frightened about it. I certainly am not embarrassed talking about it, and I'm really happy when people come up and ask.
You know, if they see a child that's acting in a way that they think's really naughty, or, you know, they might be rude and shouting and that sort of thing, that actually that's a child that's not coping. That's not necessarily that they're just being naughty.
It's, in some sense, no more my problem than it's my next-door neighbour's problem, if you see what I mean. There's nothing I can do about it beyond obvious things. I don't feel that I should have to apologise for him. I would just ask people to sympathise and understand, but it's not the same thing as having a loud stereo, having a disabled child.
Let's see how good you can do. Let's see some really good teamwork this time.
We call it reverse inclusion because our children from a mainstream primary school come to Treehouse, and traditionally it's always been the other way around.
Once you start to learn maybe a little bit more about how an autistic kid thinks, then it becomes simply less alien.
They see very quickly that there is no difference between them. They just have differences in communication. Being able to accept people for who they are is a life skill, and those life skills are what I'm doing for my children and setting them up to have those attitudes in their adult life, which are very, very important.
Simply these numbers, I think, you know, the 1 in 100, lots and lots of people know, you know, a neighbour or a nephew or a cousin or somebody who has autism, and therefore the knowledge is increasing kind of exponentially.
It's important to talk about autism because it's the sort of thing that people forget about, and they just don't want to see it. They close their eyes and pretend it's not there, and they think if they don't see it, then it doesn't exist. So it is important to talk about it.